Hey there, welcome to my channel. If you're new, I'm Steven. I'm half deaf, fully gay, on the spectrum, and sober. And if you're returning, welcome back. I knew you couldn't stay away. Today, I wanted to talk with you about how I received my autism diagnosis. But before we get into that, I just need to put it out there that I am not a mental health professional in any way, shape, or form. I hold no degrees on the subject. In fact, I hold no degrees on any subject. I'm not a therapist, a psychologist, a psychiatrist, or a school counselor. I'm just a guy with autism sharing his experience with you. And my hope is that you hear something in my story that resonates and helps you on your journey. So take what you like, leave the rest. Let's get into it. I am relatively new to this whole world of autism. I received my diagnosis from my therapist a few months ago, and officially I have autism spectrum disorder level 1. So what that means is my support needs are relatively lower than someone else on the spectrum who might be a level 2 or a level 3. It means that I can more or less take care of myself from day to day. I can hold down a job, I can drive, I can feed myself, clothe myself, manage, day-to-day tasks with relative ease. But it also means that I have some support needs and struggles that are related to my autism, related to how my brain is wired. I deal with sensory issues, I deal with social issues, I have compulsions and other disabling qualities that are directly related to my autism that set me apart from someone who has a neurotypical brain. I'm neurodivergent. We are different. Different is not bad, it's not good, it just is what it is, right? So having this kind of framework and language to better understand myself has been incredibly powerful and validating. It's a lot to unpack. I, basically have been reviewing my entire life through a new lens and trying to understand how this has shown up in my past, how it's looking today, and how better to accommodate myself in the future to make life a little bit easier. It is a lot and it is heavy. But I am so grateful for it because it gives me a sense of peace. It gives me a sense of validation. It is incredibly empowering to, to get this sense of grace, right? I feel like a lot of the challenges that I've had in my life, I've been so hard on myself for, and there's a lot of self-loathing, a lot of self-hatred, thinking that I was not good enough or that I was a failure. And so many of those things that I just absolutely hated about myself were, I'm understanding now, directly related to difficulties due to my autism. So today I get to have a greater understanding of myself moving forward, but I also get to have some grace and forgiveness for the me of the past. And that is a beautiful thing. So how I got to this place, growing up, I always had challenges with social interactions for as long as I could remember. And that is kind of the through line that got me to where I am today and seeking this diagnosis. I never could really make sense of interacting with people. It always felt like for everyone else, A plus B equaled C, and for me, it equaled, I don't know, walrus farts. I have no idea. It just didn't make any sense, right? It seemed that everybody else could move through life with this sense of ease, and for me, I felt like I had to try so hard to not even match where everybody else was. I always felt like I was falling short. And when I was a kid, it wasn't that big of a deal, right? Because I had a world of special interests and very loving and supporting parents. And I got to spend all the time I wanted up in my room with my toys and my imagination. And I didn't want or need anything else other than that. The real trouble started for me when I got to that sort of adolescent phase in my life where, these ideas of status and increased socialization and popularity start getting like infused into your brain by society and by your peers, and those were not things that I necessarily even wanted, but suddenly they became just so important. And at that point, there was sort of this divergence from my younger and more pure self, my truer self, uh, onto this pathway of outside acceptance and outside validation, right? So initially, I would kind of show up as me, the me that I knew, that I was familiar with, and that person was not very well received. Nobody cared about my screen accurate representation of a velociraptor on the playground. Nobody cared about my binders full of wildlife factoid files. Nobody wanted to hear me recite every single Star Wars movie word for word in accurate character accents. Nobody cared. They thought it was weird. And so I was pushed out. I was ostracized. I was not wanted around. And when I sort of put two and two together and realized that showing up as me was not going to work, I started what I now understand as masking and mimicking, right? I became hyper-focused on other people and their behaviors and how they acted. I took those, heightened skills of observation that served me so well in my room as a child, and getting lost in my imagination. I turned those skills onto watching other people and taking in every bit of information that I could. I became an anthropologist of sorts. Like, I just absorbed all of their behaviors, how they moved, how they talked, how they looked at each other, how they dressed, their body language, what they found funny, what they didn't, how they let every little bit of a person I studied and absorbed. And I started compiling these vast fact files in my mind of human behavior. And it really felt like that, like observing human behavior as someone who was not human. Like, I felt like an alien in a human suit. And so I took all this information and then I started acting on it. I started, I would try this, I would try that, and I would see how it would work. And maybe this would work, but that wouldn't. And then that would get filed back into the system. And I started building these just blueprints and structures for interacting in life with people, right? And it very much became the only way that I could interact in this world was following these different blueprints, these different scripts, whether it would be how I would say something to somebody, or what I would do if A happened, what I would do if B happened. And it became, person specific, situationally specific. And I would just have this vast array of information on call in a moment for any kind of interaction. And it was impressive. It was also exhausting and a lot of work. And it led to a complete fracturing of myself because I couldn't recognize me anymore, because I had become this amalgamation of everyone I'd ever met and everything I'd ever encountered. I was nobody and everybody all at the same time. And that sent me down a really dark path. That was the fuel that fueled the fire of my drinking and using for many, many years. And I'm not going to get into that story too much, but it took me to some really, really dark places. Eventually, that lifestyle reached its crescendo. My floor of shame rose to meet my my tolerance of shame, and I decided to get sober. And I've been sober for the last 7 years. And that was kind of the first stepping stone on this self-help journey. Before that, I had kind of been living in the vacuum of my mind, the echo chamber of my internal committee. And I only really had my own validation and perspectives to work with. But once I started interacting with the recovery community, I started hearing my experiences and my story coming out of other people's mouths. And that just busted open that vacuum chamber and allowed a whole bunch of light and new information to get in there. And it changed my world, right? I learned a whole bunch of new skills and ways to deal with things. I had new perspectives on myself and better understandings of how my mind worked and why I reacted to certain things, certain ways, and how things affected me. And that was great. And that journey blossomed over a number of years. But as the dust kind of settled in that area of my life and I got more, grounded and into, a new lifestyle and a new routine, it became apparent that there were some areas of my life that the tools of recovery were not helping me with. And surprise, surprise, a lot of it revolved around social interactions and relationships with people, and those structures and scripts that maybe were helping me in previous eras of my life were no longer helping me. They were no longer serving me, and they were failing, and I didn't know what to do. So I started seeking therapy to try to understand what I was doing wrong. It was very much still focused on like, you're messing up somehow, you're failing at life, you suck at this. How do we fix you so you could be better for them, right? And I went through a couple of therapists that were not particularly good matches for me. And then I met the therapist that I have now. And on this path, I started researching a few other mental health disorders. And I did a little bit of research on autism, but not a lot, but just enough to know that people with autism shared some of the same social struggles that I had. So it was in the realm of possibility for me. And I relayed that to my therapist when I started therapy with them, but I didn't want to guide them to that place. I wanted to say hey, I think this could be possible, but it also might not be the thing. I'm open to talking about it if you think it's something that we should talk about. And she was fine with that. And so I just started getting into whatever was going on with my life and talking about this and that. And a lot of the conversations would center around different struggles I was having with people in my life and relationships in my life. And I would, be talking to her about these different structures that I have, this how to make a friend step-by-step guide, and all these different mechanisms of my mind. And eventually she just asked me if I had ever been screened for autism, and I said no. And she asked me if I wanted to be, and I said sure, why not. So she gave me a couple of tests. She gave me the CAT-Q and the ASRS-V 1.1. CAT-Q stands for Camouflaging Autistic Traits Questionnaire, and ASRS-V 1.1 stands for the Adult ADHD Self-Reporting Scale. And in the realm of autism testing, there are tests like that, which are a little bit smaller format. And then there are very granular, large format tests that are performed by neuropsychologists. They happen over multiple sessions. They do a lot of digging. They might even ask your family questions. They're also very expensive. So the tests I got were not those tests. But she did say that while the information that we learn from these tests might not be as granular as that, it will provide enough information to lean either yes or no when it comes to autism. So I took the ASRS test first. I scored a little bit above average there, and she said that meant that there might be some stuff going on, but not entirely indicative of anything specifically, but that's why we have the CAT-Q. So I took the CAT-Q test, and that bitch read me for filth. Every single question on there was looking in a mirror. And it was that kind of experience where I saw written down on the page all of the very specific things that I had going on in my head, all of the tiny little systems and structures that I thought that I had created bespoke just for me were written out on the page. And I was gagged. I was just oh my God, this is literally my whole life. This is everything. that I think, every way that I think, it's all just right here. How can this be possible? So in the moment, I just knew, I just knew. I was like, we're here. We found whatever it is, and so she graded that test, and I scored very high, apparently higher than an average autistic person might score. And she said that because of those two results, she could confidently give me a diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder. So I received that. I sat with it for a while. I started doing my own research. And after a week or so, I felt like we had hit the nail on the head. Like everything that I learned from that testing experience, everything that I discovered while I was doing my own research just felt true to me. Like it felt like the answers that I had been looking for. And it started feeling like all those whys were starting to be answered as well. And now, on the other side of it, I feel really good. I feel very grateful that I finally have a name to all of this. I feel grateful that I get to be reacquainted with myself. And I am grateful that I now have an ever-growing new set of tools to move ahead in my life with and help make things a little bit easier for me. Sometimes I get sad. Sometimes I get angry, thinking back to that kid who struggled so much. Like I can't help but think how much easier life might have been if I had known this back then. But I also know that back then it wasn't really on anybody's radar. They hadn't even revised the diagnostic criteria for autism to include a spectrum when I was a kid. So it's not anybody's fault. It just wasn't a thing that was talked about. So there was no way I could have known then. But what matters is that I know now, and what matters is what I do now that I know moving ahead. So part of that is, continuing to be in therapy, continuing to educate myself, continuing to explore, learn, and grow, and, always being honest with myself and taking action when I need to. But another part of that is sharing what is going on with me with you. When I was doing my own research and education, one of the most important resources I had was other people on the spectrum who had the courage to tell their stories online and share their experiences with me. And that helped me really feel seen and heard and validated and safe and understood. And it made me realize that I can offer that to somebody else. And I have a very unique perspective, being somebody who is neurodivergent, queer, sober, and someone who suffers from hearing loss, and all that stuff we'll get into in later videos. But I hope that me being here, sharing myself with you, will bring you some of those same feelings of validation, peace, and camaraderie. So if you're still here and listening, thank you so much for sticking around. I know this was a long one. They won't all be like that. But I appreciate your attention and your time. And if you want to hear more about my story or stay informed, subscribe to my channel, hit that like button and the bell like they all say at the end of the videos. And I'm going to keep posting. All right. Have a good night. Take care.